Tampa, Florida, and the black population and their contribution during the earlier part of this century, as my father, Francisco Rodriguez, knows it and as he experienced it. I shall ask the questions in English so that you will know what I'm asking him, and then I shall then ask him in Spanish. However, he understands English, so therefore whenever he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to wait until he will not have to wait until I translate for him. I shall also instruct him that whenever he wants to, he may just answer the question, and if he wants to proceed on his own and add whatever he wants to add, he can. You two, on the other hand, may want to ask some questions as a result of that are provoked by the questions that I'm asking, so you're free to do so. In other words, it's a kind of free for all discussion.
Okay.
And what I had in mind was that just as soon as it is possible, I will replay the tapes and I will put it in writing for you, and I'll try. First, I'll give you a rough draft in which you may delete what you think is irrelevant, and then I'll try to put it, in nice reasonable form for you. Okay, is that satisfactory?
That's fantastic.
All right.
Put the date and time on this record.
Okay. This is Fred Beaton and Otis Anthony interviewing Mr. Francisco Rodriguez at the Tampa Public Library, Ybor City branch. The date is August 10th, 1978. August 11th, 1978 at 10:30.
Okay, very good. Panchito, ¿usted comprende lo que vamos a hacer?
Me doy cuenta, pero no lo comprendo muy bien.
Bueno, ellos están ahora formulando una historia de la población negra en Tampa en general y en Ybor City en particular. Y lo que ellos quieren saber de usted, cualquier información que usted puede tener, sabe, tocante la historia de Tampa. Por ejemplo, cuáles motivos lo trajo usted aquí y otros cubanos negros que vinieron de Cuba a la parte, sabe, naciente de este siglo, el nacimiento de Martí Maceo, ciertas personalidades que tomaban parte en la historia o particularmente en la guerra, como el señor Pedroso, la relación de los negros, José Martí, la opinión de Maceo, la fábrica, el movimiento obrero entre los negros en la industria del tabaco y con bastante énfasis en la formulación y la organización y el progreso de Martí Maceo. Bien, bueno, yo le voy a hacer la pregunta primero en inglés para que ellos comprendan lo que estoy haciendo, y después se la hago usted en español y usted la contesta. Tiene que hablar alto porque esta máquina está recordando lo que usted está diciendo. Muy bien. All right. Y si yo le hago una pregunta en inglés y usted ya la comprende, no es necesario traducirla. Pero donde usted no comprende la pregunta completamente que yo he hecho en inglés, pues entonces yo se la hago en español. Bien. All right. Vamos a empezar. Let us start first by you telling us your name, your place of birth, and your age now as you remember. ¿Qué le pasa? ¿O quiere acercarse?
Así, un poquito más para aquí.
Okay, you want to get nearer to the
No, turn the table around this way. You're fine.
Primero, denos su nombre, su edad de nacimiento y aproximadamente sabe su edad o año de nacimiento.
Ya se puede empezar.
Sí, señor. Sí, señor.
Bueno, el nombre mío es Francisco Rodríguez. My name is Francisco.
No, I'll translate. Pues. No, yo traduzco.
All
no
right,
sé.
okay.
Sí.
Ya está bien. Mi nombre es Francisco Rodríguez. Yo nací en la ciudad de Pinar del Río, la República de Cuba. Nací en el año 1888.
Muy bien. ¿Usted quiere traducirle eso? He can translate.
No, tradúcelo tú que...
All right, his name is Francisco Rodriguez. He was born in the province of Pinar del Rio, Pinardelrio, in the Republic of Cuba. ¿Qué año?
1888.
1888. ¿Cuándo vino usted a la ciudad de Tampa? When did you come to Tampa?
Desembarqué en la ciudad de Tampa el día 3 de noviembre de 1909.
I came to Tampa the 3rd of November 1909. What motivated you to come to Tampa?
Bueno, yo era muy jovencito cuando eso y tenía ansias de progreso y oyendo siempre hablar de los Estados Unidos porque teníamos ahí instituida una institución que se llama lectura y con esa lectura nos enterábamos de todo lo que pasaba en el mundo entero.
Muy bien,
Naturalmente.
muy bien, un momentico. La lectura estaba en la fábrica o no sé dónde.
En todas las fábricas.
En toda parte. All right. My question was, what motivated you to come to Tampa, Florida? He says that he was very young at the time, and there was an institution in every factory that he worked called the lecturer, and they always brought glowing accounts of industrial and great progress in the United States, and of course he wanted to come over. Muy bien, sí.
¿Cuál es la otra pregunta?
Díganos, tell us something about, give us a description rather, of Tampa as you remember it the day that you embarked here. Denos una descripción de Tampa como usted se acuerda de ella el día que usted desembarcó aquí en Tampa, el primer día.
Pues era una ciudad bastante pobre y bastante mezquina en cultura.
It was a very poor city and very, very scarce in culture.
Pero había un gran movimiento porque la industria del tabaco daba empleo a muchos miles de obreros que aprendían ese oficio en Cuba y aquí eran preferidos debido a que sabían muy bien el oficio ese.
But it held out great promise to Latins who were in the cigar business, who had learned who were very skillful as a result of their training in making cigars in Cuba. Cigar.
Bien. La cultura de los obreros que trabajan en la industria del tabaco es bastante pobre, o era bastante pobre en ese tiempo.
The culture and training of the cigar workers was a very meager one during those days.
Naturalmente, siempre que el trabajo escaseaba, los primeros que eran víctimas de esa escasez de trabajo eran los tabaqueros negros, pero había que preferirlo debido a que sabían el oficio bastante bien, el oficio de hacer tabaco.
Naturally, whenever there was a scarcity of work, the first to lose their jobs were the black workers. Yet the black workers were one of the most skilled in the cigar industry. They're going to tell us something about the domestic life in Tampa during those days. Díganos algo de la vida doméstica en Tampa durante esos días.
Durante esos días la vida doméstica de Tampa era muy corriente, muy sencilla se puede decir. Habida consideración de que no había aquí ningún otro movimiento de cultura, nada más que trabajar en la industria del tabaco. Y consecuentemente, pues, de ahí no se deriva gran cantidad de cultura, sino luchar por la vida. de la manera más decorosa posible.
Domestic life was the very essence of simplicity because there was nothing to do in those days but to go back and work. And the fight for life was a very, very serious one. So there was little room for cultural growth or any other kind of growth. What factors motivated the organization of the Club Martí Maceo? You understand that one?
La Sociedad Martí Maceo fue el resultado de, al acabarse la guerra de Cuba, porque al principio los blancos y los negros cubanos se reunían para discutir sus asuntos y ayudar con su actividad la situación de Cuba, la independencia de Cuba.
This is very important. Prior to the end of the war, the black and white Cubans would fraternize and meet together to discuss common problems. These problems being, what could they in Tampa do to help the war situation in Cuba? Muy bien.
Y había una gran fraternidad entre los dos grupos, de negros cubanos y blancos cubanos.
There was a great fraternal spirit between the black Cubans and the white Cubans during this period.
Todos se reunían en el mismo sitio, pero andando el tiempo se acabó la guerra de Cuba y entonces cada fracción se reunía en su propio...
Sigue.
Se reunían en su casa o en cualquier casa de algún amigo.
The black and whites met together at the same place without thought of race. But after the war, there was a fragmentation between the two races, and each started going his way.
Con tal motivo, resulta que cada uno tenía que formar su grupo aparte, porque sacaron a colación de que aquí los negros y los blancos tenían que estar separados porque los blancos no admitían a los negros en su compañía.
Therefore, it became necessary for each group, the white and the black, to form its own organizations, since after the war, the white Cubans began adhering to the local custom of separating from blacks.
De aquí vino la formación de la Sociedad Martí Maceo para los negros y los separaba de los blancos. Pero como que resulta que el héroe máximo de la historia de Cuba era un negro, pues siempre había un poco de fraternidad entre negros y blancos.
This brought on the birth of the Martí Maceo Cuban Club. However, since the epic hero of Cuba was a black man himself, there was always some fraternal spirit between the two groups. I'd like to pause just a minute now and go back to the war period, because I think there's something, 2 or 3 important factors that I would not want to forget. Number one, Panchito, ahora yo quiero regresar un momentico y lo traer para la guerra, porque yo quisiera que usted me dijera algo de ciertos personajes en la guerra, como la mujer de Pedroso o Maceo, and what have you. Comprende? All right, so the question I've just indicated, just pointed to you, was the fact that I'd like to just perhaps retrace myself and go back a little bit to the war. I wanted him to tell me something about certain black personalities, some of them here, some of them not here, that played a very important part in influencing the lives of the black people here, and how they did so. Usted quiere decirnos, sabe, de los personajes que tomaron una parte importante, que tuvieron una influencia en la vida de los negros aquí en Tampa. Por ejemplo, esta mujer Pedroso. Maceo mismito, aunque no estaba aquí en Tampa, sabe la influencia que...
La influencia de los negros cubanos en los asuntos políticos de la isla de Cuba ha sido muy grande. Y ha sido grande porque en Cuba los principales guerreros que se esforzaron en traer la República de Cuba, en extraer la República de Cuba de las manos de España, todos eran negros.
Un momentito. The influence of black people in Tampa and the war in Cuba was great, because in Cuba itself, the leading men who took a very active part in snatching Cuba away from Spain were black themselves. Usted quiere darnos unos cuantos nombres. Will you give us some names?
Guerreros.
Sí, estos personajes que usted se refiere.
Bien. El principal guerrero, el principal emancipador de la isla de Cuba, de las manos de España, fue Antonio Maceo.
Now he's giving us some of the names. The principal emancipator of Cuba was Antonio Maceo, which we all know.
Muchos valores secundarios en la influencia que han tenido los negros de Cuba en el advenimiento de la República han pasado a la historia sin que sean conocidos, pero el que haya nacido allí sabe la influencia cuál ha sido, la influencia que ellos han ejercido en la emancipación del pueblo cubano.
The history of the blacks as it relates to the emancipation of Cuba has not been given its proper place in history, but anyone who has ever lived in Cuba and who has been a reader of Cuban events in history is well aware of these facts.
En la lista debemos poner en primera línea, ya está puesto Antonio Maceo. Pero igualmente que este hombre, había muchos valientes cubanos como Quintín Bandera. ¿Cuál otro podríamos decir? Hay muchos generales, pero son generales de poca categoría.
There were many generals and many who played an important part. One of them was named Quintín Bandera. All right, now bring us to Tampa. Vamos a Tampa. Díganos algo de esta mujer Pedroso.
Pedroso. Esa fue una mujer de color que era muy patriota. Y en su casa se hospedó José Martí, debido a que era la única casa en que él tenía confianza, porque la industria del tabaco aquí era de los españoles. Y naturalmente la influencia de estos hombres que manejaban la industria no era pequeña, era bastante fuerte.
Toca un momentito. He is talking now. ¿Cómo el nombre completo de esta señora? Pedroso, el primer nombre.
Paulina, espera un momento. Paulina Pedroso.
All right. Pauline Pedroso was a black woman who organized the black people here in a movement to raise money and enthusiasm for the war. Her work is very, very important because her house was the only house that they trusted.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see, here is a situation that all these Cubans were here, but the people that fed them were the Spanish, because they owned the cigar factories. So they found themselves in a very awkward position. They were working for their very oppressors, even here in the United States. So the only person that they trusted as a meeting place to go to was this woman's house, Paulina Pedroso. And she was the only one who had guts enough to actually have meetings at her house. And the great Martin, who was, the great apostle of Cuban freedom, would meet at her house. ¿Y dónde quedaba esa casa?
Esa casa quedaba donde mismo está ahora, donde está la estatua de...
And this house was right where you have that statue of Martí on 8th Avenue and 13th Street, which incidentally happened to be a house where my family lived for many years. Muy bien, sigue. Díganos si usted tiene otro dato tocante a esta mujer.
Bueno, pues el otro dato,
Díganos algo de su apariencia.
era una mujer bastante fea de cara. Vamos a notar todas estas cosas, ¿no?
She was a very homely looking woman.
Bastante fea de cara, pero eso sí, cuando se subía en la tribuna, con un lenguaje bastante rudo, se imponía a la atención llamaba la atención de todo el mundo.
She was a very homely, era muy prieta,
¿Cómo?
muy prieta.
Prieta de África.
She was a very homely looking woman, very, very dark, with almost extreme African features. But she had, while she lacked formal education, her speaking ability was such that whenever she took the speaking podium, she could captivate the whole audience. She had a tremendous driving force. She had to, many of the blacks who were anxious to gain independence and who were anxious to start little movements in Ybor City were fearful of the fact of their bosses. It's a very familiar case. You know, you have that every day. The bosses own the factory, so they're losing a job. But she could get them going. Muy bien.
Al extremo de que esa mujer llamaba tanto la atención que una vez, esta es una anécdota que se corre, ¿sabes?
Mm-hmm.
Una vez resulta que había alguno que tenía miedo y se decían, "Bueno, pero ¿cómo nos vamos a arreglar?", y ponía obstáculos a elementos retrógrados, entonces miedo de hacer el sacrificio. Y se paró ella en la tribuna y dice, pues el hombre que tenga miedo a morir por su patria, que venga y se ponga esta saya que yo estoy usando y que me dé los pantalones que él no merece usar.
He says that on one occasion they were speaking to a group and there was quite a bit of reluctance in the group about their jobs and what have you. So she took the stage and said that the man who is fearful of the Spanish, I want him to come over here and give me his trousers and he may have my skirt because we should exchange. He should be wearing the skirts and I need to wear the trousers that he has on. It's one of the famous incidents in Ybor City.
Era una mujer bien valiente, que no tenía miedo a nada, ¿sabes? Y en su casa fue donde se hospedó Martí, porque cogió miedo, como que tenían los fabricantes, eran los dueños de la industria, como lo han sido hasta ahora. Pues resulta que él se hospedaba allí en la casa de Martina Pedroso, porque allí tenía confianza y no tenía que tener miedo a una traición.
He was repeating something he said already, and that is that her house was a meeting place for Mr. Marti. In fact, he used to stop at her house. That's the only place that he was not afraid to come to. Apparently, he was afraid, even in the homes of white Cubans, you know, to stop there because he was fearful of his life. Did Marti make many trips here to Tampa during the war?
Martí vino aquí emigrando porque él era el delegado que tenían los cubanos que estaban en guerra. Era el delegado principal. Él era el que organizaba las expediciones, no solo las de aquí, sino que dirigía las de todo el país, que le daba franquicia a Martí, porque los americanos patriotas que no querían sino que brillara aquello de Cuba para los cubanos y América para los americanos y eso, pues resulta que de aquí se deriva que los cubanos le daban poder a José Martí desde el gobierno central que tenían organizado en Nueva York. Y de ahí resulta también que organizaban aquí una expedición y él le daba salida por los callos esos que se atraviesan para ir a Cayo Hueso. le daba salida por los callos eso y así hacían llegar recursos a Cuba, promovido por la propaganda de Martí y de la gestión del pueblo cubano de aquí de Tampa, de Cayo Hueso, de Nueva Orleans y de Nueva York.
Jose Marti would organize expeditions which ultimately would lead by way of the Keys, and points of organization were Tampa, New York, and New Orleans. What about the Rough Riders of President Theodore Roosevelt?
¿De qué?
El grupo que organizó que era presidente, bueno, que por fin fue presidente, Teddy Roosevelt.
El grupo que él organizó.
Sí, que por fin fue
Sí,
en la loma de San Juan.
Ajá. Ese fue, bueno, un grupo organizado con la tolerancia del gobierno americano.
Pero bueno, usted presenció esta gente cuando pasaron por aquí por Tampa. I asked him, did he see those people when they passed through Tampa?
Yo no estaba aquí.
¿Usted estaba en Cuba entonces?
No.
He was in Cuba when they passed through here. You all have any other questions about the war before I move on?
I understand that there was some kind of historical contradiction between the Battle of San Juan Hill and the soldiers' behavior, something to the fact that they were accustomed to not moving until they got orders or something. I don't know if you would know about this. And they had to move on their own and how bravely they fought and this type of thing.
You mean between the Cuban soldiers?
No, this was Rough Riders and
The Rough Riders
I think it was.
had some conflict at San
Yeah,
Juan
like
Hill.
the hill wasn't really San Juan Hill, it was really another hill close to it or something like that.
That escapes me. I'll have to look
Okay,
that up.
don't worry about it. It's
Okay.
just one of
Any
those
other
things.
questions? About this particular bit in Tampa and what have you.
I don't know if you want to answer that one, but were blacks involved with like in the streets with fights, gang fights with Spanish, etc. This time due to the high spirited nature of the situation between the Spanish and the Cubans there.
¿Usted comprendió esa pregunta?
No bien.
Él quiere saber si durante este periodo hubo conflicto entre los negros y los españoles, los negros latinos, los negros cubanos y los españoles, a consecuencia, ¿sabe?, de opiniones y actitudes de la guerra.
Hubieron algunos rozamientos, pero no de gran importancia. Los motivos de que no hubiera ese gran rozamiento entre los dos grupos se debe a que habían muchos españoles que habían sufrido las consecuencias del mal gobierno colonial, lo mismo en Cuba que en otras partes. Y ese elemento, aunque era bien escaso, pero eso sí era muy activo. Y el resultado era que tenían una especie de contrapeso en los retrógrados, los amantes de la libertad de Cuba, de la libertad en general, y aquellos que no correspondían con esa misma opinión.
There were a few minor conflicts. The great deterrent to large-scale conflicts in Evo City and in our environs to this situation lies in the fact that there were so many Spaniards themselves who had suffered from the tyranny of and the mismanagement of their own government, that they were on the Cuban side. So therefore there weren't too many of the Spaniards. The real enemy, of course, was the Spanish manufacturers, but many of the Spaniards who were the ordinary street men were on the side of the Cubans.
Yes, whether the native blacks were somehow influenced by Marty and the magnetism that he exemplified.
Oh yes, absolutely. There's no question about that. Su pregunta es si oh, you mean the Americans?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a different question.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
La pregunta es, ¿qué influencia tuvo Martí sobre Martí o Maceo?
Or Maceo.
Either one.
Well, we better make that in two because it's quite different. Tuvo Martí sobre los negros locales, no cubanos, los negros locales. ¿Usted sabe?
¿Qué influencia tuvo de los trabajos de Martí sobre los negros cubanos?
No, los negros locales, no, los negros de aquí, de los Estados Unidos.
Pues
¿Usted sabe?
no tuvo ninguno.
None whatsoever. I thought that was an answer.
Like, that's true for Maceo.
And that's true for myself. But I'd ask him just out of an abundance of caution.
I'd like to know, I don't know how to phrase it, I'd like to know what was the ideology? Was there a set kind of ideology, like an anti-imperialist or anti-colonial ideology among the people at that time? Or was it just a matter of kicking the Spanish out? Were there ideological kinds of discussions going on in their study groups to develop the people?
Era si había la ideología con relación del conflicto entre los españoles y los cubanos. Si había una ideología sobre la guerra, o nada más que la ansiedad en que salieron los españoles de Cuba.
Bueno, la idea de la emancipación de los negros tuvo influencia en todos los sectores del mundo. Pero hay que leer con cuidado esto, porque cualquiera diría, bueno, ¿y cómo es que siendo los españoles los dueños de la industria permitían todo eso? Pero es que habían españoles dueños de fábrica como Igor, Vicente Martínez Igor, que simpatizaban con Cuba, porque ese Martínez Igor había sido votado de la isla de Cuba, pudo refugiarse en Cayo Hueso y ahí fundó una fábrica, y de ahí vino la fábrica esa para Cuba.
I think it's a very important detail. I don't know if he answered the question, but he gave a very important detail. He says that the freedom movement of the slaves in the United States had great influence upon the movement in Cuba. And it had great influence upon the movement in Spanish colonies. Martínez Ybor, for whom Ybor said his name, was not a Cuban, was a Spaniard. But unlike the other Spaniards, he was very sympathetic with Cuban independence, and therefore he earned the eye and the wrath of his own people, which might be a good historical fact to kind of look a little bit more. It would be a very interesting fact. He was almost an outcast as far as some people are concerned, because he was in favor of the abolition of slavery and the independence of Cuba. Again. Así es que el ímpetu primordial era que independencia
de Cuba.
The primordial impetus upon which any ideology was based was, of course, Cuban independence. Get them out. All right, we want to move back to Martín Maceo now. Bueno, vamos otra vez a Martín Maceo. Díganos ahora, mejor dicho, denos ahora de datos tocante la organización Martín Maceo, miembros, los primeros años. I've asked him to give us some. We stopped and went back to war. Now we're coming back to Martín Maceo and giving us some dates. Remember, we said that he was strong because there was a dichotomy the two groups, once the war was over and they didn't need to be together so much, the whites went their way and the blacks went their way. And the Martí Maceo Society of black Cubans grew out of the need for the black Cubans to have a gathering place to be among themselves. Muy bien.
Bien, parte de esto ya queda dicho, mucho esto que trataba de explicar. Esto, al verse los negros obligados a formar su grupo aparte, constituyeron la sociedad Martí Maceo. Esa sociedad siempre predicaba la unión entre todos los negros, porque éramos muy poquitos aquí y teníamos que llevarnos bien.
Okay, un momentico. The society always preached, number one, unity among all black Cubans, because we were in a minority and we needed to be always working as a unit. Now my next question is going to be this. Is there any philosophical significance behind the name Martí Maceo? Martí, a white man, Maceo, a black man. Martí, an apostle of independence, Maceo, a fighter for independence. Or it's just a coincidence if we want. ¿Usted comprendió la pregunta?
Lo que tú acabas de decir.
La pregunta. El nombre, la unión Martí Maceo. Aquí dice Martí Maceo, that is not the name. The name is La Unión Martí Maceo. That's the name is the Union Martí Maceo. Okay. ¿Habrá alguna significación filosófica en ese nombre, la Unión Martí Maceo, cuya filosofía, teniendo algún factor racial, Martí siendo un hombre blanco, Maceo siendo un hombre negro, Martí siendo un apóstol, hombre de gran cultura y gran enseñanza, Maceo siendo un hombre militar, una especie de héroe épico. I ask him, is there any significance to the title, any philosophical significance to the title, the Union Martí Maceo, Martí being a white, highly learned, highly cultured man who was not involved in the physical aspects of the war, but rather the gathering of funds, the marshalling of forces, and what have you. Maceo, a black man, a military man, an epic hero, on the other side. They were contrasting figures. It almost seems to me as if it's something we would do today, today when we're trying to placate the race troubles, we give a little bit to both sides. We've been in the South today, we have a little tokenism here, give the blacks a little bit, give the whites a little bit, whatnot. It almost seems that. Usted comprendió la pregunta, bueno, que fue muy larga, it's a very long question, I don't know.
Bueno, no me acuerdo en qué consistió la pregunta.
No, los dos hombres, aunque el objetivo de los dos era mismo, semejante, independencia de Cuba, pero eran diferentes hombres, uno blanco, uno negro, uno siendo un hombre de gran elocuencia, de gran enseñanza, un hombre que se dedicó a unir las fuerzas, a incorporar fondos, todo eso por la parte de Martí. Maceo, en por otra parte, el hombre militar, un héroe épico. Y la pregunta es si el nombre que ustedes escogieron tenía algo que ver con la filosofía, ¿sabe? Sería posible que escogieran un hombre blanco y un negro, un militar, un apóstol, para darle una especie de chance a los dos factores. Aquí habían un grupo de blancos cubanos, un grupo de negros cubanos.
Bueno, yo creo que lo que ustedes quieren saber no es posible tenerlo en cuenta, porque durante la guerra de independencia, hubieron dos guerras de independencia. Una duró 10 años y la otra duró 4. En la última, pero la de 4 años, se obtuvo la libertad de España. Pero el prejuicio de raza durante la guerra fue absolutamente nulo. No hubo, pero de ningún aspecto que se examine se puede considerar que hubiera habido otra cosa.
¿Usted se refiere a la Segunda Guerra?
A la Segunda Guerra. No es posible notar a través de la historia ninguna posibilidad de que si lo hubiera habido, la guerra, bueno, los dos brotes que hubieron prueban que no podía haber separación de ninguna clase en las dos razas, sino que reinaría en todo el mayor grado de fraternidad posible hasta obtener la libertad completa de la isla de Cuba.
Well, he seems to feel that it was not, the title was not chosen for the motivations that I have tried to indicate, for the reason that there was no prejudice in the manner that we know it, certainly during the war, that both groups had one objective, and that is independence from Spain. And all of the concerns about prejudice being wrong laid on. I'm inclined to agree that, American race prejudice is sui generis. It's nothing like it. It's not like any other race prejudice anywhere.
There's nothing like the fraternity of the people involved in the struggle for independence, regardless of race. What I wanted to go back to the cigar industry.
All right. Well,
go ahead, I'm pretty sure the war.
We through with the war. I wanted to get something about Martin Maceo.
Yes, please.
¿Usted quiere decirnos, sabe, algo del progreso de la influencia que Martín Maceo, tras los años, tuvo en esta comunidad? My question was, you want to tell us some influence that the Martín Maceo Club had on the community over the years?
Pues bueno, no ha tenido influencia ninguna, teniendo en cuenta que la influencia de los grupos se deja ver, sea por ejemplo las fracciones españolas que hay aquí. Cada una de estas fracciones ha fabricado buenos palacios, buenos buildings, buenos edificios, y los cubanos negros, por ser muy poquitos y por ser la protección que se nos hace, que le ha sido brindada a los otros, se nos ha negado a los negros, pues resulta que el progreso del negro cubano aquí se reduce a unos cuantos, una media docena, podemos decir, de negros cubanos que han obtenido un poco de educación. En esto tienes que tener cuidado porque no vaya a ser que se nos quiera que estamos quejándonos de algo imaginario, ¿sabes? De suerte que la influencia que ha tenido Martí Maceo en el grupo se puede decir que es nula, porque aquí la cultura en general no es muy brillante. Aquí venía uno a ganarse la vida nada más, y que tenía chispa del futuro, pues educaba un poco sus hijos.
Sí, pero bueno, eso me explica, Panchito, es una influencia de algún valor. Por ejemplo, si se refiere a progreso material, no ha visto mucho. Pero, por ejemplo, hubo aquí un periodo donde nunca se veía un caso donde un negro tenía que prenderlo por borrachera o por...
Bueno, eso sí.
I think the point is being made that once the group got to itself, it was a small group that it had very little effect upon the community. If you measure effect in terms of material things, you know, they didn't build big buildings and things like that. However, they did have they did make an indentation in such things as, for instance, they had they boasted of a high level of very good behavior. You never heard of, you know, a black Cuban arrested, for example, beating his wife or stealing, until, you know, later years when they became real Americans, you know, and they all had, and this I can testify to. I remember this, that they were given some special treatment. They weren't as good as white people, but they were considered better than black Americans. Always knew that they considered better. So there was some strange hybrid there. Por ejemplo, las veladas que habían aquí, las funciones, todo eso son artículos de cultura. For instance, they used to have almost monthly recitals and speech making and plays and whatnot, when no other part of the black community was doing that. Then there were which I guess you've heard many times, the readers in the factories, which played a very, very important part. The readers. Oh, I guess I think I know the answer to that question too, but I'd rather let you answer. ¿Hubo algún periodo donde hubo algún lector negro en alguna fábrica?
Sí.
¿Quién?
Facundo Acción.
Facundo Acción, yeah. Mariano Puñal no fue nunca. Yo
Trató, pero no dio...
Yeah, they had one. His name was Facundo Acción, who happens to be related. Facundo Acción él no es familia de Silvia Grignani. O de la
Fundación es cuñado de eso.
Yeah, but he's related to Miss Grignani.
Only one.
Uno nada más.
Uno nada más. Hubieron muchos que trataron, pero no dieron resultados.
He says they had several trials, but they just didn't make the grade. Because I was trying to, I remember one. I didn't know whether he'd fail or succeed. One man, I remember that personally. And my father said he didn't make the grade. He tried out for it, but didn't make it. But yeah, they did have black readers. Facundo Acción. That's quite a name.
Slow. I want to get that right.
Facundo Acción. I'm all right.
I'd like to know, in the working conditions within the factory, was there any segregated?
No. I worked for more than 60 years in the cigar factory. All my family were raised here. This is the youngest one of my children. And I sustain them, I keep them with my work in the cigar factory all the time.
Pero nunca hubo segregación racial.
No.
No, I remember.
Espera un
Even
poquito.
within my time.
Hay una fábrica que es Java Tampa.
Yeah, one factory. Howard Tampa.
Ahí no trabajaban negros, pero ese de americanos solo.
Howard Tampa was owned by Americans, and no blacks even worked there. They had all these factories, and blacks worked all over the place. But in Howard Tampa, no blacks worked there. And it was owned by Americans.
Can you tell us anything about some of the unions that was there?
We learned about the strikes. We made much of the information you give us about the unions and the strikes and where blacks involved as being organized.
Ellos quieren saber cualquier información que usted tenga tocante a uniones y huelgas y qué parte tomaban los negros en esto.
Bueno, aquí la cuestión de las huelgas pueden limitarse nada más que a dos casos. Uno, por allá por 1910 o 11, fue la primera intención que hicieron para que la fábrica, los fabricantes reconocieran la unión y tener trato de unión a unión de fabricantes, unión de tabaqueros. Y la otra parte fue en el 20, del 20 al 21, por ahí hubo una huelga que duró 10 años. Los tabaqueros de color cubanos se opusieron al reconocimiento ese, porque donde quiera que sea reconocido la fábrica por los fabricantes, el negro ha sido desechado.
¿Dice la unión?
La unión. Los tabaqueros negros no han querido la unión esa nunca.
Ok, bueno, vamos a empezar. La primera era 1910.
1910.
All right, so the first strike was in he named two significant strikes up to this point. The first was in 1910. ¿Y qué tiempo duró eso?
Duró 7 meses.
And that one lasted several months. Now, blacks, cigar makers always opposed union recognition. And this was what this strike was all about. Because union recognitions, as blacks knew it then, and I'm talking not strictly about the cigar industry, always meant the expulsion of blacks from any position. The unions were not in favor of giving blacks any kind of recognition or anything for blacks, for the white people. The other one was in 1920. The other one was in 1920, and that lasted for many, many years. Dice 10 años.
10 meses.
10 meses. That one lasted 10 months. ¿Y qué fue el resultado?
La perdieron ellos.
They lost that one too.
Los tabaqueros negros se opusieron, por más de que ya aquí no había en ese tiempo gran número de tabaqueros negros, pero los que habían todos eran contrarios a la huelga esa. Y el fenómeno es el mismo de la primera huelga a la segunda. Es decir, que el negro no quiere la unión esa porque es esclavista. Esclavista no, despreciadora del negro y despreciadora de los valores de la raza negra cubana.
The strike of 1920 was the same, it lasted for 10 months. But the blacks were opposed to it because the unions were not in favor of blacks. The blacks stood to gain nothing from the cigar unions because they were racist themselves. But no, go ahead.
You might answer the same. I'd like to know, does he recall any stories of the vigilante activities, the Shanghai of union leaders and the time fellas of union leaders, this type of thing?
¿Usted se acuerda? ¿Usted se acuerda de algunas situaciones donde maltrataron a las cabezas de uniones, sea de tabaco o algo así, como el caso de Shoemaker y varios otros?
Bueno, eso es un caso que yo no lo conozco bien. El Shoemaker ese es un líder, ¿no? Bueno, yo no, porque ya cuando eso yo no estaba aquí, yo creo que...
I know, in fact, I know that case better than he does because at least one of the main cases you had here involved the chief of police and the outstanding citizens. And I don't know whether I don't know whether that man is dead or not. He was a very good, he turned out to be a very good friend of Blythe's. He used to come to NACP meetings a few years ago when he got very, very sick. His name was Poolno, Eugene Poolno. He was enough. I promised him that sometimes I'd pick up a whole material and write a book just on him. I also promised him that if he was successful, I'd give all his money to his wife because she was, she wasn't too rich. But it's one of the promises I made I haven't followed up on. It was a terrible case, which is the subject of another time, we can talk about this. Terrible, terrible, terrible. One of the worst situations we had there. The chief of police was involved, who is still alive and around. He's no longer chief of police. That's the case of Shoemaker. Was Shoemaker's name? Shoemaker and Poolno. Shoemaker died. They taught him, he died. Poolno survived. And about a year ago, he was still alive, though very old and so much sick. Okay, any other questions?
I'd like for him to name some of the factories he didn't have in Tampa. Just some of them you can remember.
Okay. ¿Usted me puede dar nombre de alguna de las fábricas que había aquí entonces?
Habían como 20 o 25 fábricas de
There were
tabaco.
about 20, 25 factories.
¿Cuál es la otra parte de esa misma pregunta?
Los nombres.
Las que hay ahora.
La que había entonces.
Oh,
Algunas todavía existen.
Bueno, esta de aquí, de Stackenberg, Martínez y Wall, la trocha, ¿cómo es el nombre de la trocha? La trocha la conoce todo el mundo. Ahí trabajaba Cari últimamente.
Había
Corral Wodisca.
Corral Wodisca, y tú trabajabas en Marcelino Pérez, pero ese no es el nombre de Marcelino Pérez, de Regenburg.
Regenburg está de aquí de la esquina.
Del reloj, ¿verdad? Regenburg, el reloj.
Ajá.
Pero Marcelino Pérez no, Berman Brothers, ¿cómo se llama Marcelino Pérez?
Marcelino Pérez nada más era un quinchalón.
No.
Ese es el King B, la que tú me preguntas ahora.
No, Marcelino Pérez tenía otro nombre. Le llamaban Marcelino Pérez, un casi nombre vulgar, pero ese era another name.
Yo lo único que te puedo decir es que estaba al fondo de Berryman.
Berryman.
Sí,
yo sé.
Y Berryman es la misma del King B, en la calle 18 y la avenida 12. Entonces que ahí hay cuatro. Argüelles López es otra, 5.
¿Y dónde estaba la que llamaban La Pila?
La Pila aquí en la Sexta Avenida.
Yes.
De cedra de madera.
Sí.
Okay, yeah, I have another question about folklore. This is a little off what we've been talking about. I'd like to know how much of the religious tradition of Cuba, that the blacks had in Cuba, they brought to America, how much were they able to maintain, and are the stories true that they were able to get into herbal kinds of medicines and stuff to take care of people through a great deal of natural means?
¿Usted comprendió la pregunta?
Still survive today.
Bueno, la pregunta es si es verdad que los cubanos trajeron muchas tradiciones religiosas de Cuba, puesto de santos y espíritus y sistema de cura con cocimientos y cosas.
Bueno, En Cuba hay bastante superstición y esa superstición es la que da origen a veces a juicios falsos. Las supersticiones de Cuba, tú tienes una buena experiencia de cómo son, por la sinvergüencería que le hicieron a la China de Juan Franco y todo eso.
He's reminded me of something I did as a kid once.
Resulta de esto que al venir aquí pues lo atraían, pero aquí no tiene engendro eso, no prende esa superstición en el alma del cubano cuando llega aquí, porque aquí no se está creyendo en que tal o cual hierba lo cure a uno, de que tal o cual oración de suerte que por la poca experiencia que hay en Cuba de superstición está anulada con el grado del avance de la cultura general del mundo.
Well, he was trying, first, number one, he was saying that they did bring it over here, but of course it died out with the passage of time, as it would be expected. But, you know, the Cubans, like many island groups, had several religions. You know, they had a group of saints to correspond to every Christian saint. Like, you know, I said one day I was going to really read up on it, so I'd be very interesting. But they had, for every Christian saint you had, they had an African saint to correspond, yeah. And there was, you see, first of all, no, I said two, they had about three different religions. Number one was the basic Christianity, okay? Mm-hmm. Then they had saint worship. Mm-hmm. And you had to be good to know all those saints, you know. ¿Cómo se llama la santa más famosa de todas? María.
Santa más famosa.
Que corresponde al santo africano Ochun. Calidad de cobre. I wouldn't even know how to equate them, but they're all equated. You see, it's a three-tier thing. They have regular saints that they worship. Then they have a African saint to correspond. All right. Then they have really a four-tier system. Then they have the spirits. So they have all that, and you can just pick yours. Now, some people believe in the whole local persons in this community. There was a lady, a Cuban lady, who was steeped in all of these superstitions here. And she was always making me get punished, and then she didn't like me. She was always telling off me something I did. I climbed a tree and stole her mangoes, or some of those things. And my best friend at the time, we were kids in grade school, was Raynell E. Sloan, who was very active in the Central Life Insurance Company. And Sloan was a very methodical person, even from the time he was a child. And he and I were, the mischief that we did was not like other children. Howard Mitchell was always methodical. Mm-hmm. So we sat one day and we planned how to get this lady. We knew that she was very superstitious. So we, in those days, you know, there was no such thing as a package of cigarettes. You bought a little bag of tobacco, and then you took the little pieces of paper and you roll you on. So we took one of those bags and we changed it around to make it look mysterious, and we took some sand and we dyed it by pouring ink on it, so it became like a blue powder, and we put it in this bag and took a feather from a chicken. I don't know where you got the chicken, and put it in the bag. Now, for a person who believes in voodoo, that's a terrible looking thing. What is it? I don't know, but it's terrible, you know, it's a bad. So we took, and in those days, houses had little shutters on them, you know, and so we slipped the thing through the lady's shutter. And when she came in, she was cleaning the house, and she saw this bag, and boy, she screamed and she carried on. And they caused something terrible in the neighborhood. So terrible that nobody knew that I did until I was grown enough not to get a whipping about it. The lady must have spent hundreds of dollars to be exorcised from this. She went and got a witch doctor to clean her out because the witch doctor told her that it was designed to rot her legs off. And he told her this was a special poisonous substance that someone had bought from South America, from the jungles of South America. I think he charged about $25 or $30 for it, which was a lot of money during that time. And so she spent quite a fortune getting herself straight. And this is my father telling me, reminding me that I had done that. But this is a result of how many people thought. Then she spent a second fortune finding out who did it. It naturally didn't bother me. I knew she wasn't going to find out. She went to another witch doctor to find out who did it. You see, one witch doctor would tell you what it is. And how she, so the way she had to exercise her house was to get some male urine and wash her house down with male urine, and then take a white cross and take the bag and bury it in the sand and put a cross on top of it. That would, that's in a way the evil spirits. And then came the part that showed that maybe providence is not kind when you play tricks on ignorant people, because the next witch doctor told her that a lady in the neighborhood had done that to her. That wasn't nice. She really got the landlord to make the lady move, the young lady in the neighborhood. And that has always been in my conscience, especially since I like the lady's daughter. But it's one of the stories in my life that I said someday when I get ready to write my biography, I'm going to include that. And this is my father reminded me of, because I had taken advantage, of the superstition. But going back to that, they have 4 tiers of religion. They have the standard Christianity, the regular saints that you read about. Then they have a series of saints, and you worship the saint of your birth month or your birthday or something. Then you have another saint, black saint, that corresponds to whatever saint you have.
And this is a ceremony that still exists today.
Right? Stacks of them. And then you have the spirits. So you have a kind of 4-tier worship. Now, there are some people who might skip 1 or 2 of the grades, you see, but then there are some that follow the whole thing. And there are some that are so well versed that they know all of the saints. And everybody has a saint. Everybody has a saint. And, they get together and they start talking, and somebody says, "Who's your saint?" "My saint is Saint so-and-so and so-and-so." I happen to remember that perhaps the most prominent saint is one called Akayali Koba. She is really one of the powerful saints. But she has a corresponding black saint called Ochun, who is an African saint. And so they borrow a lot of African worship. Plus, of course, then you have the spirits. Very, very interesting.
Okay. I have no more questions.
I'll tell you something that we haven't included, that maybe I can give it to you in another session. I know about as much about that as my father, and that is the numbers culture. That's a culture within itself.
Yeah. Could we go into that briefly?
Yeah, well, they have, for years, I might give you a little something on right quick and later on. Let me see what time, we've argued about the moral, deterioration of lottery. But with Cuban people, this was not an immoral thing. It was a way of life. Mm-hmm. But first and foremost, you had 2 types of lotteries. You had the ones that were from 1 to 100 that you would, play. Then you had the ones that were lottery tickets, and they involved, you could pick up as much as $7,000 on, if you got the right ticket, which would throw in Cuba. I think Castro cut it out. Running side by side with the lottery was the dream book. And you would have a dream, and the dream always corresponded to a number. There was always someone in the community who was an expert on dreams. And you go to this person and say, I dream about a spider. And they say, well, a spider, that's 7. So you play 7. Now, most of those people, my mother and her cousin and all of them, had an encyclopedic mind about numbers. It was fantastic. You can imagine how they did it. They knew, the lottery would throw every day. And they could sit here today and tell you what number threw 30 days ago. and whose number that is, whose number it was. It was fantastic. It was fantastic. And this was a conversation piece. I have always contended, I read a sociologist who said that this was not an immoral thing, and I agree with him. Because first of all, they never played for large sums. A dime, 35 cents, what have you. And it was a conversation piece. They'd sit and talk. Somebody would sit and say, it's been exactly 6 months since my number fell. And somebody said, yeah, that's right, because it fell on such a date. It was just amazing. Now, my mother was a woman of very, very low formal training. But my mother had an encyclopedic mind as to the date that these numbers fell. She could tell you easily. She could also tell you, what was your number, And your number was whatever number you chose, And they would use such word as subscribe. You subscribe to your number. The numbers man would put you down every day for, my mother's number was 98, I do remember that. And he would put Miss Carrie down every day for 98, 10 cents. She didn't have to pay it, Not that day. She'd pay him Saturday when she got her money. And if 98 would come out, the man would bring my mama her $8 for a dime. Now, if for any reason she wanted more, she had to. But now she was subscribed daily to 98, and that was understood. I remember one incident, just as vivid as it happened yesterday, where I had joined what they call the cadets. The Knights of Pythias had some little kids that were training. They were the equivalent of our Boy Scouts today. Blacks have made in the Boy Scouts. I knew the time when they didn't even take black Boy Scouts. It's really true, they did. And they were going to have what they were going to turn out. And boy, I wanted to put on that uniform. And I told my mom about it. Mama said, son, I don't have a thing, just barely making it. He said, but now you just, and let me tell you something. You talk about numbers being so bad. My mother and all of those people, those black people in New York City, would relate numbers to religion. And they would ask God to throw their number. And my mama told me that day, she said, I'm going to ask God to throw my number. You have faith, son. And my mother had so much faith, as long as I live, I will never forget this. My mother had so much faith that right where there is a furniture store called Berry Hill, I think, right on 7th Avenue and 14th Street right now, they had a U.S. Army store. And they sold little uniforms for kids. And we lived on the corner, it doesn't even exist now, of 12th Street and 6th Avenue. No, not in the corner. A house right off from the corner. 1704 12th Street, I'll never forget. My mother had so much faith that her number would fall that she said, son, I want you to have faith. Have faith in the Lord. That she dressed me up. See, she had to do it right away because the numbers didn't throw until 8 o'clock and the place was at 9. My mother dressed me and sat me on the porch. And she just went on about her business. And the man, and at 8:15, that man said, Miss Carrie, that's the week come by, and brought my mama $8. And she took me by the hand, took me around and bought me that uniform. It's one of those things in your life. I could see that as if it were happening yesterday. And they never saw that as a sin. This was part of their life. Now, my father never played. He never. He was very conservative.
He never played.
Never did, but my mama did. I didn't see him object to her getting the money, though, but my mother did. But because my mother she didn't spend too much money on. Now, some people actually, would spend a lot of money on it, whatever. But this is a very, very interesting part.
Well, I was thinking of one thing, this one brief thing. I don't know if you would want to answer that, but I would like to know from the eyes of the black Cuban, how did they view the black Americans? And, I don't want that you don't want me to answer that honestly, because I think that'll give us some insight.
La pregunta es, ¿qué es la opinión general de los negros cubanos tienen de los negros americanos?
Bueno, yo tengo idea de que los americanos se figuran que los negros cubanos menoscaban un poco en los valores del negro americano. Todo esto no es sino una cuestión de costumbre. Y además de una cuestión de costumbre, el hecho de no poderse entender, porque uno habla en inglés y el otro habla español. Pero fuera de eso, no hay ninguna animadversión del negro cubano para el negro americano. Si no se intiman un poco más, es debido a eso, que no se entienden. Pero cuando se entienden bien, no hay rozamiento de ninguna clase.
He says that he has a strong suspicion that black Americans feel that black Latins look down on black Americans. But he feels that this perhaps is an erroneous concept that grows out of the language barrier that way, and they do not speak the same language. And the customs are different. Much can be said about this. I don't know. I'm not sure that I agree completely. Well, first of all, you have to bear in mind that the black Cubans come from a small country, and people from small countries are highly nationalistic.
That's right, and in culture.
Yeah. They're highly nationalistic, and they're quick to feel that someone from another country is, is all well and what have you. So it may well be that it depends upon who you go to. I know some Latins who feel that anything that is not Latin, it's just not there. But as my father just indicated, it may be the language barrier, but I also think that it is it's a barrier of customs. We were in a very strange position when we came up. We were Latins by virtue of our background, but we came up in American schools. And today that would sound like anything. It doesn't sound like, but in my time, when the lines were really drawn, when Latins lived in a little section and they had their own clubs and whatnot, it was quite a problem. For instance, my mother and father adhered to Latin customs, and they weren't about to change because we were living in the American community. No way. Take this. In a Latin home in those days, it would be unheard of for a girl to have a young man to visit her and to sit in the front room or in any room in the house, yes, the front room, alone. She had to be chaperoned at all times. So if she sat there, some member of the family had to sit, which is an absurd thing, but there it was, and this was a custom. Now, if they were to visit an American family and saw a girl sitting with her boyfriend in the front room, sitting on a love chair or wherever they sit, they would consider something highly immoral. The idea of a fellow coming in and taking the girl out, where are you going to the movie? And that was preposterous. Now remember, we're talking about there is a question of time involved too, but part of it was the time in which we were living, but a great part of it was the culture. The Latins had a much higher concept of the sacredness of womanhood than the Americans. And to that extent, they had certain customs. And to them, if you violated certain customs, you just went there. But as my father indicated, of course, my English was a great barrier. Now, my mother always felt that a good way to die would be, if you got sick, to go to an American doctor. Never. If she ever had to, if she had to, she felt that this you were putting your life in jeopardy. No.
What of this is were there any other groups outside of the Spanish, the Cubans, and Italians and blacks that occupied Ybor City that he can remember during that period? Any other groups of people?
La pregunta, well, not groups, no. La pregunta es si usted sabe si había otro grupo más de los negros, los latinos, los españoles, los americanos. Italiano.
Son tres grupos principales los que hay: italiano, americano
y latino.
Y español.
Yeah, no, there weren't. You might have found at any given moment, you might have found a Jew or Jew around, but even just one person. Or you might even find a Frenchman around, but just one person. Something like that. This was the basic composition of Ybor City was, or Tampa for that matter, was Spaniards, Cubans, Italians. And within those groups, of course, you had your, well, black and whites, Anglo-Saxon black and whites, and Anglo-Saxon Cubans. It's interesting that people have never gotten that straight about, Cubans. They don't know that, so many people right here in Tampa don't know there's such a thing as a black Cuban. I experience that every day. They don't know that they exist. If you look at the application for almost anything, you never find a place for a black Cuban. They'll say Hispanic, white. And I always, sometimes I'm applying for something, and I tell them, well, I really don't belong to any of these groups, because they don't ever take into consideration that there's such a thing as a black Cuban. I know that in many instances, when I've told them that, some of them have thought that I was trying to put on, I was trying to be quiet or something. This away from Tampa. Now, Tampa, people in Tampa didn't know such animals do exist, black Cubans. But I've been in places where people thought that, I was trying to put up a front of, something at the time. I think that a lot of people don't understand that the African influence is very strong in the islands. You have just so many black people in Cuba. Or, for instance, they don't understand that the same thing is true in Haiti. Haiti is a black republic, and they all speak French. But even blacks themselves cannot conceive of a black man speaking anything but some brand or something called American English.
Well, I'd like to let him know, Rod, and you,